Hello, I'm John Fox. I'm here in the Collins Archives in Glasgow, surrounded by almost 200 years of publishing history. Now, 200 years ago, words such as tweet, icon and follow had very different meanings to those in common usage today. So who monitors these language changes? And who decides when these words go into the dictionary and when the meanings change? Elaine Higgleton heads up the team here at Collins.
So Elaine, how did it all begin?
Well, it all began back in the early 1800s with William Collins, who was a Scottish philanthropist. There was a big tradition in Scotland in the 19th century of reasonably well-off middle-class families really wanting to put their money into education and into things that would help raise the level and standards of the working classes and the middle classes. So there was a very big movement towards publishing books for education and books for self-improvement and to help people better themselves and to help provide education for all. And William Collins was really part of that whole ethos, that whole thing that was going on in Scotland in the early 19th century. And the first thing that he started with was actually a Greek-English lexicon, which might seem a bit strange now, but of course it's very much about making the Greek New Testament accessible to a wider audience. So that was why they started with a Greek-English lexicon, because it was about making that understanding of the Bible accessible to a wider audience.
So what came next?
So one of his first dictionaries was a family dictionary, which he called the Household Dictionary, which was aimed very much at middle-class families and households. And then he published illustrated dictionaries in the 1840s. Some of them went on to sell millions of copies. And he published the Shilling Dictionary, also in the middle of the 19th century, which was a more affordable dictionary, which actually was really one of the first dictionaries that lots of people could afford to buy because it was so reasonably priced.
Everyone remembers having their own gem dictionaries at school. I know I've got many. They are the classic souvenir, if you like, from that part of your life. When did all this publishing start for the gems?
Well, the first gem dictionary was published in 1902, so probably the thinking and the planning behind the gem dictionary would have started probably in around about, I would say probably about 1890, because it probably took about 10 years to write, because of course at the time everything was done by hand, didn't have computers, so everything was written by hand. So probably took them about 10 years to put that dictionary together based on content that they already had. And then the first one was published in 1902 at the price of £1, and it's really become the best-selling little dictionary in the world by far. One of the interesting things about the gem dictionary, I was looking back at this little one, which I'll talk about in a minute, is how it's always been international in content and coverage. It's never just been about British English. There's a couple of words in here that we would never ever dream of using today that are from overseas territories. Cayuse, which is a type of horse, which is a 19th century term from North America. And also tikkie, I believe it's said tikkie, which was a threepenny bit in South Africa. So it's interesting, it's always been international and never just British English. This one actually was given to me by my grandfather. I don't think he had it when he was at school. He was born in about 1914. So I think he had this when he started work as a young man in the late 1920s. But this was the one that he always had at home, that was always there when I went to visit my grandparents. And I inherited it when he died, and little did I know when he died back in the 1980s that I would one day be responsible for new editions of this dictionary, so I'm very proud to have that.
So Elaine, we've talked about the gems. Can you tell us a bit about the bigger English dictionaries now?
Yes, I think the real innovation with English dictionaries for Collins came in 1979 when they published the first edition of Collins' English Dictionary. One of the things that made this dictionary really innovative was that it was the first dictionary to have denested entries, and that sounds technical, but it's very simple explanation. So up until around about 1960, if you wanted to look up the word nappy in the dictionary, you would have to look at the entry for napkin, because nappy is derived from napkin. But of course, what the Collins editors at the time in the 1970s believed was that that wasn't very easy to use, very hard to find words. You needed to know where the word came from to be able to look it up in the dictionary. So what they decided to do was to get rid of that way of arranging entries and just arrange everything alphabetically, regardless of etymology. So nappy became an entry in its own right. So that's denesting, and that's what made this dictionary so innovative in 1979. The other thing that was really innovative about it was that it also included entries for people and places, and it was the first everyday dictionary to do that. And of course it also really focused on current vocabulary, so the words that people needed to know and use on an everyday basis.
So what were the buzzwords at the time?
So the buzzwords at the time were things like nuclear winter, Iron Curtain and Cold War, which creates a really nice parallel with some of the buzzwords this time, which of course includes Arab Spring. That's gone into the new edition of the dictionary. And also this time we've got things like gleeks and Boris bikes, reflecting our concern with the environment.
Collins is also very well known for its bilingual dictionary publishing. Jude, can you tell us a bit about how they've innovated in this area?
Yes, of course. I thought I'd bring along the Collins English-Spanish, Spanish-English Dictionary, which was created in 1971 by pioneering lexicographer Colin Smith, who was a university professor at Cambridge. He pioneered to bring 3 new things to the bilingual dictionary, and they were that it offered everyday language, so the language that learners would truly need to get by. It also represented British and American English, as well as European Spanish and Latin American Spanish. And believe it or not, it was the first time that translations have been done by native speakers. So Colin worked closely with a guy based in New York and a guy based in Spain. And then before the time of email, that must have been a really time-consuming process to get this dictionary delivered. In fact, I believe it took about 10 years in the making. So I thought I'd share with you a couple of lines from the introduction that Colin Smith wrote when he created this dictionary, just to prove to you how sort of groundbreaking and down-to-earth his objectives were. Here's what he said. The average speaker has a family and a car, an interest in a variety of mildly scholarly subjects, an active or passive interest in a number of sports. He watches his health, follows space exploration, and scientific progress in general terms. He travels abroad, grows flowers, eats with some variety, prays, votes, makes love, and occasionally war. And of course, this is all still very relevant today, in as much as the learners of Spanish and English will still do all of these things, but probably have an iPad in addition to a family and a car, and be following Twitter rather than space exploration.
Collins is still true to its founder's vision in 1819 of giving knowledge to all and employment to generations of Glaswegians. Today we're going to hear from Anna, who currently works on the dictionary team here at Collins, and from her Aunt Linda, who worked here in the 1960s and 70s.
It was a great place to work. They were very good. I mean, the Collinses themselves, they were always in their ivory tower, but as a firm, they were very good to their staff. And as I say, the welfare department, the canteen, there was a bonus. We used to see Agatha Christie paid the bonus. They made so much profit from her. She was still alive in these days. So there was a bonus paid every year. The money was good. It was a great firm to work for. I don't really know why I left, to be honest.
Did you use a dictionary yourself at all for your everyday?
Oh, absolutely, yes, the dictionary, because we didn't have word processors with it all built in. So yes, the dictionaries were thumbed silly, actually, checking words and checking your spelling and all that sort of stuff, absolutely, yeah.
I think we can't get away with spelling mistakes at Collins.
No, that's true.
So how have techniques changed for dictionary makers?
Well, they've changed a lot, obviously. Instead of having file cards, which my predecessors used to have to keep track of definitions and changing meanings, we now, of course, have a lot of computerised data sets, and particularly the Collins corpus. And the Collins corpus was developed in the 1980s, and we were the first dictionary publisher to have a big corpus. And what a corpus is millions and millions of words of written and spoken English that have come in from all kinds of sources: newspapers, magazines, books, media, television, radio, lots of transcribed speech and articles and writing and presentations. And it just sits in a big database, and we can interrogate that to see how language is really used today. So we can see, for example, that back in the 1980s, the most common use of mouse was a small furry rodent. That was the most common sense. And now, of course, the most common sense of mouse is not small furry rodent, but the small computer gadget that we all use. So we can use the corpus to track how words change their meaning and to track new words. Another example of how corpus shows us how meanings change is in the use of cloud. because of course only a couple of years ago clouds were only those white fuzzy things that you see outside of the window and that bring rain and snow if you're unlucky. Now, of course, we all talk about cloud computing. So again, the corpus shows us how language is changing and really helps us find the new uses of words to make sure that our dictionaries fully reflect the language that we're all speaking every day. Corpus is really important for dictionaries, for learners of English as a foreign language in particular, because you know, I'm a native speaker and I can look up a word and it doesn't matter to me which order the entries, the senses are listed in the dictionary. I can find what I'm looking for. But if you're a learner, you need to have the most frequent sense first, because chances are that's the one you want to look up. And after the most frequent, you want the next most frequent, and so on. So corpus was really important is really important for learners' dictionaries. And the COBUILD dictionary, the COBUILD English dictionary, published in the late 1980s, was the first learners' dictionary to be fully based on corpus. A really innovative piece of publishing at the time, and still one of the best-selling learners' dictionaries in the world.
With the increasing rate of the evolution of language, it's now more important than ever to have an up-to-date dictionary. It's great to know that Collins can provide you with dictionaries, however you want them, wherever you are.